So if you have ADHD, if you have autism and you work in the UK, you will know how hard it is to just work. Our society is not made up for people who think outside the normal range. To be honest, I think it's a wider problem though, because our society is essentially not made up for people. For animals, certainly not children. We live in Helltopia. But specifically, if you have a neurodiversity, you are not taken seriously within work within the UK. It has been my experience. They set up networks, but a lot of the time, especially if you have a lower needs or what is perceived as lower needs, you're basically told to that network is your support system. Yes, you have occupational health. Yes, you have HR, and you have access to work. Now, I will talk about access to work down the line because it is an important thing that we have within our country. But the barriers even to getting that are very real. And from when I was diagnosed, I was initially diagnosed with ADHD about 6 years ago, just after I had my son. For me, I still question that diagnosis, and this is something I think that is true for the more and more people I speak to who have ADHD or autism. They are constantly thinking about whether they've tricked themselves into having this, whether essentially they're lying to themselves. And a lot of that, I think, is because of how society is set up. If you have perceived low needs, people think you could just be faking it, and you hear consistently, oh, I have a little bit of that. I have a little bit of autism, I have a little bit of ADHD, and they don't realise the disabling effects of having those things. So then when you ask for help, it is perceived that you are asking for too much. For instance, I really could do with an ADHD coach, work coach, because they understand your brain, they understand what you've gone through, and they can give you coping mechanisms which I don't know off the bat. So that's one thing. The second thing that I essentially could do with at work is some kind of PA to look through my inbox, to look through my admin, organise stuff, prioritise things for me, and then I can just get on with the doing of the actual work. Far too much of my time is spent in a freeze mode when I am overwhelmed by looking at my inbox. These are things that should be standard in workplaces now, I believe, especially with the advent of... I hate AI, so I'm not going to say AI agents, but there are systems, there are workflows that can be put in place in workplaces relatively cheap that would actually save so much time without using AI. That's a whole separate rant I'll go into. But essentially, there are things workplaces could and should be doing which they actually put the emphasis on the networks of neurodiverse people to do. That has been my experience. I have worked for a large global company previously and put in an access to work request, and I've chased them I put it in February, and I ended up going on sick in May because nothing had been actioned off the back of it. I'd not heard a thing. I ended up quitting a year later because they knew they had done wrong at that point, but they were still... I remember in August getting emails from a PA saying, do you actually need all this stuff that's on this access to work request? Blew my mind how poorly they understood the process itself. And I'm very lucky with my profession, and I'm happy to do another video about my profession because I think it's actually perfect for the brain type I have, but it's not necessarily easy. I have had, I would say, 3 large bouts of burnout. Now, 2 of those, I was undiagnosed, did not know I had this, and of course it was all put down to stress and anxiety, and I even had a doctor, GP, once sit down and teach me to meditate, bearing in mind I'm a yoga teacher and I was brought up by hippies. Like, I've been meditating. I went to a Buddhist meditation module thing over 10 weeks when I was 9 years old. I know how to meditate. The NHS, yet again, is another thing I can talk about, another point. The problem with these diagnoses and the way that we deal with burnout as well is it's not baked into organisations' policies. or processes to build resilience within the system and build the proper support networks within the system so people don't reach burnout to start with. And yet again, this is not just somewhat an issue for people with neurodiversity. This is how our organisations are set up. This is how our society is set up. That we're still working 40 hours a week is bizarre. It is bizarre. We could be way more productive, it's been proven, working less hours. We have the technology now. It is just inbuilt into our psyche that unless you work, you are worthless. And that is another issue, because now I'm going to widen it out to all disabilities. For me, I was brought up, and I mean, quite frankly, it's ridiculous that I even have to say this, but if you are a person, you have intrinsic value. That's it. Doesn't matter what effort you put into things. It doesn't matter whether you work or not. You have intrinsic value. And those that are suffering, those that need more support, are the ones that should be supported, so they can flower into their full potential, just so we're an empathetic, compassionate society. And time again, we have shown that we are being ran by corporations, and none of that is true. So the support structures that should be built in to stop people having burnout, full stop, to stop living in this helltopia where you have to live, wage to wage, is just not there. So we are going to consistently end up paying what a huge benefit bill for people on sick leave, for people with disabilities, rather than just harnessing their natural talents, helping them grow as people, being compassionate, giving them the space, time and resources needed to reach their full potential. Doesn't just count for disabled people, but I want to zone into disabled people, because we seem to have lost our empathy chip, our humanity chip within society recently.